The Wild Waste Tales. If you enjoyed this Wild West drama of discipline, respect, and fiery personalities colliding, make sure you like, share, and subscribe for more intense frontier storytelling by A. Khan. Stay with us for part 3. You won't believe what happens when fire meets calm again on the dusty roads of Dust Creek. Like, subscribe, watching from? Let's get started. The desert sun glared over the frontier as Raina walked through Dust Creek, with the same reckless heat in her eyes. People shifted out of her path, whispering nervously, already bracing themselves for whatever trouble she felt like stirring up today. Raina never moved quietly, never behaved gently, and never cared who watched. She swept through the marketplace, snatching an apple from a merchant's stall without paying and tossing it in the air like she owned the whole town. A few kids laughed, admiring her boldness, but the adults shrank away. Everyone knew her stubborn temper burned even hotter than the Arizona sun above. A barrel stacked near the water pump caught her attention. Without hesitation, she shoved it with her boot, sending water splashing across the dusty ground. Merchants shouted, cursing, but not a single one dared step toward her. Raina only smirked, enjoying the chaos she created. She spotted a cowboy resting lazily against a post with his hat tipped over his eyes. In a heartbeat, she snatched the hat and placed it on her own head, letting out a playful whistle. The cowboy leaped up in shock, but when he realized who had taken it, he backed away instead of confronting her. Next, she swung herself onto a fence near 2 horses. One stomped nervously, sensing her unpredictable energy, while the other snorted and jumped sideways. Raina clapped her hands, amused at how easily she could send animals and people scrambling. To her, mischief was sport, rebellion a habit she had never learned to break. But then she saw a horse she hadn't touched yet, a tall, strong Mustang with deep brown eyes and a polished saddle. It clearly belonged to someone who cared about order, discipline, and responsibility, which meant Raina absolutely had to mess with it. That was simply how her instincts worked. She swung one leg over the saddle, laughing, already imagining the owner's shocked reaction when they realized someone like her was galloping away on their prized horse. The wild part of her loved stealing moments like these, even if she only rode a few feet before getting bored. Just as she tightened her grip on the reins, a firm hand caught her arm. It was not rough, not painful, but undeniably strong and unyielding. Raina froze, startled not by fear but by shock. Almost no one dared touch her, much less try to stop her. She turned sharply to see who was fool enough. Cole Harding stood beside her, eyes calm and steady beneath the brim of his own hat, a different one, not the stolen one she wore. He was a man known for his quiet discipline, a rancher who never raised his
voice, never acted impulsively, and never backed down from anything worth standing for. Raina narrowed her gaze, trying to pull her arm free, but Cole didn't budge. His grip remained steady, controlled, and oddly patient. For someone who looked so rugged, he carried himself with a calmness that felt almost unsettling to a woman who thrived on provoking reactions. "Enough," he said, his voice low but firm. There was no anger, no fear, just a certainty that cut through her defiance like a blade. Most people yelled when she caused trouble. Most people trembled. Cole did neither. He simply stood there, grounded like an oak tree, refusing to be moved by a storm. Raina kicked dust toward him, hoping to provoke irritation, but Cole only blinked. She tried twisting her arm again, but his hand stayed exactly where it was. She hissed like a wildcat, her temper flaring hotter, confused as to why this man wasn't behaving like everyone else. The onlookers held their breath, shocked to see someone finally confronting her. A few whispered that Cole was a fool, that he didn't know who he was dealing with, but others watched with a strange curiosity, wondering if this was the moment Dust Creek's most unpredictable firebrand finally met someone who could handle her. Raina lifted her chin, glaring fiercely, daring him to shout, threaten, or retreat. But Cole simply removed her from the saddle with steady composure, guiding her back to solid ground. His restraint only fueled her annoyance. She wanted to push harder, break his patience, force him into reacting like everyone else. "You're done causing trouble today," he said. His tone wasn't loud or commanding, just absolutely certain. That certainty felt like an invisible fence she didn't know how to climb over. Reyna opened her mouth to snap back, but the words tangled somewhere between fury and confusion. She had always known how to handle people, frighten them, frustrate them, confuse them, or overwhelm them. But Cole was different. He wasn't impressed by her mischief or intimidated by her attitude. He wasn't even trying to control her. He was simply stopping her, as though it was the most reasonable thing in the world. Reyna's heart pounded in irritation and something she didn't like to admit: curiosity. Why wasn't he scared? Why didn't he step back when she glared? Why didn't he roll his eyes, sigh, or laugh at her like others sometimes did? He only held her arm gently, but firmly, waiting for her chaos to settle. His calmness felt like a challenge, and Reyna never walked away from a challenge. She yanked her arm again, and this time he loosened enough for her to pull free. She stepped back, fists clenched, ready to unleash a storm of words that would scorch the ground. But when she looked into his eyes, expecting anger or judgment, she found something else: steady disappointment. That expression struck her harder than any threat would have. "What do you care?" she snapped, voice sharp. "Everyone else
Just avoids me. Why can't you do the same?" "Because you're better than this," Cole answered simply. His calm tone made her blink. No one had ever spoken to her like she had potential instead of problems. No one saw anything in her except trouble. But Cole spoke as if he genuinely expected more from her. She hated how that made her chest tighten. Reyna stepped closer, trying to regain her dominance. "You don't know me." Her voice carried a shaky edge she didn't intend to reveal. But Cole lifted his chin slightly, observing her without flinching. "You act wild to keep people at a distance," he said, "but you don't scare me." Those words slipped under her skin, irritating her deeply because they felt true. Reyna thrived on being untouchable, unpredictable, untamed. But this man wasn't intimidated, just observant. And somehow that made her feel exposed in a way she wasn't used to. She crossed her arms tightly, trying to shield that brief flicker of vulnerability. The crowd slowly dispersed, leaving the two of them standing in the settling dust. Reyna didn't like the quiet. Quiet made her think. Quiet made her feel. And she didn't want either. Cole released a slow breath. "You've got strength, fire, and a good mind, but you waste it on trouble." He motioned toward the scattered barrels, spooked horses, and frightened merchants. "This isn't who you really are." She swallowed hard, hating how his words hit deeper than they should. She wanted to shrug them off, pretend she didn't care, but her heart betrayed her by beating just a little too fast. "I don't need your advice," she growled. "Maybe not," he replied, "but you needed someone to stop you today." His voice remained frustratingly steady, refusing to escalate. Reyna suddenly felt small under his gaze, not weak, but seen. That was worse. Being seen meant someone might understand her, and understanding meant danger. She took a step back, unsure whether to run, yell, or throw another barrel, just to feel in control again. But something in his expression rooted her in place, as if walking away from this moment would only leave her regretting it later. For the first time in a long while, Reyna didn't know what to do. Cole didn't press further. He only tipped his head slightly, gave her back the stolen cowboy hat, and walked toward his horse. His calm footsteps stirred something unfamiliar in her chest, an uncomfortable mixture of irritation, respect, and a strange pull she couldn't explain. Reyna stood in silence, the dust settling around her. No one had ever stood their ground against her without fear. No one had ever spoken to her without contempt. No one had ever challenged her without hurting her pride. Except Cole Harding, and for reasons she didn't yet understand, she couldn't stop thinking about the way he held her arm. Firm, steady, but never cruel. A discipline she wasn't used to. A discipline she didn't know she wanted until now. The wild Apache girl had finally met someone she
couldn't push away. and it shook her more than she cared to admit. Cole walked beside Raina with calm, steady footsteps, neither dragging her along nor allowing her to wander back toward the chaos she had caused. The marketplace noise faded behind them, leaving only the crunch of boots on dry earth and the low whistle of desert wind swirling between them. Raina kept her arms crossed tightly, chin high, refusing to show an ounce of remorse. She was 30 years old, grown, fierce, untamed. Yet somehow standing beside Cole made her feel strangely younger, as if she were being held accountable in a way no one ever dared before. Cole didn't raise his voice, didn't lecture, didn't puff his chest with authority. Instead, he looked at her with a patient steadiness that irritated her more than anger would have. She preferred storms she could fight, not quiet discipline that reflected her behavior back at her. He stopped beside an old wooden corral, resting his hand against the rail. "People don't fear you because you're strong," he said slowly, letting the words land carefully. "They fear you because you don't respect their boundaries." His tone wasn't accusing, just honest, which made it sting more sharply. Raina stiffened, shoulders locked. His words rolled through her like a wave hitting a wall. No one had ever spoken to her like this. Most flinched, avoided her, or barked orders she willingly ignored. Cole did none of that. He just told the truth, and somehow that hurt the most. She tried to brush it off with a scoff. "Respect? This town never showed me any." Her voice cracked just enough that she hoped he didn't notice. She didn't want him seeing the cracks beneath her fire, didn't want him guessing how many years she'd spent building armor around herself. Cole didn't challenge her tone. He only watched her with eyes that saw more than she wanted to reveal. "Respect isn't a gift handed to you," he replied softly. "It's something you give first. Then it comes back. Sometimes slow, sometimes late. But it comes." His voice carried the weight of lived experience. Raina rolled her eyes, frustrated by how calm he remained. Anger she could fight, disgust she understood. But calm understanding? That caught her off guard. It made her feel unprepared, unbalanced, as though he were steady ground while she was the dust storm circling around him. She turned on her heel, trying to walk away before his words reached deeper than she could handle. But Cole stepped in front of her, not aggressively, not blocking her like a wall, but simply positioning himself so she would have to confront him rather than flee. His presence felt unshakable. "You want to be treated like an adult?" he asked, voice firm but not unkind. "Then act like one." The sentence hung between them like a desert flag snapping in the wind. It wasn't an insult, it wasn't a threat. It was a line, clear, simple, and honest. Raina froze, breath caught. She wasn't used to anyone drawing boundaries.
With her, she was used to crossing lines, not meeting them. A strange warmth crawled up her neck, part irritation, part embarrassment, part something she couldn't name. She hated how steady his voice was, hated it because she respected it. For the first time, she couldn't hold his gaze. Her eyes dropped instinctively, not in surrender, but in understanding, exactly as she had felt in part one when he first caught her. She swallowed hard, unsure why his words struck her with the force of truth she wasn't prepared to hear. She kicked at a rock near her boot, struggling with emotions she rarely allowed herself to feel. Shame, curiosity, frustration, and something like accountability knotted together inside her chest. How could this man she'd known for only a short time see her so clearly when others never looked past her fire? Cole waited silently, not pushing her, not scolding her, simply letting her process the truth at her own pace. His patience felt heavier than anger ever could have. She wasn't used to anyone giving her room to think. She wasn't even used to giving herself that space. She finally lifted her head slightly. "So what now?" she asked, her voice quieter than before, not soft, just less defensive. Cole met her gaze with a steady confidence that made her chest tighten unexpectedly. He crossed his arms, mirroring her earlier posture, but his expression remained calm. "Now," he said, "you decide who you want to be." The simple statement carried more weight than anything she'd heard in years. It wasn't an order. It wasn't a warning. It was an invitation, one she didn't know how to accept, yet didn't want to ignore. Raina shifted uncomfortably, her pride fighting the truth inside her. She wanted to stay angry, wanted to spit back something sharp, but the words wouldn't form. Instead, all she could muster was a quiet breath, heavy with unspoken thoughts she wasn't ready to share. Cole took a step back, giving her space again. "You've got fire," he said, "but fire can warm or destroy. It depends on the direction you give it." He didn't look at her like she was a problem to fix. He looked at her like she was someone capable of more. Those words shook something deep within her. Her whole life, people had labeled her wild, unpredictable, dangerous trouble. No one had told her she could be something better. No one had believed she could aim her fire, control it, shape it into something other than chaos. No one except Cole. She swallowed hard, fighting against the instinct to reject his words. Something in her chest softened, just a tiny crack in the armor she had built over 30 years of surviving on her own terms. She didn't want to admit it, but his belief in her meant something. "Why do you care?" she whispered, barely louder than the wind. The vulnerability in her voice surprised even herself. She looked away, afraid of what she might see in his expression if she met his eyes. But Cole didn't mock her, didn't question her strength.
"Because someone should," he said quietly. "Everyone deserves one person who sees more in them than their mistakes." His voice carried no pity, just sincerity. And sincerity, she realized, was a language she had forgotten how to understand. She felt a lump in her throat she hadn't expected. She blinked quickly, fighting it back, refusing to let tears fall, tears she hadn't shed in years. Cole didn't reach out. He didn't touch her. He didn't crowd her. He simply stood close enough to be steady, but far enough to give her dignity. That mattered more than she could say. After a long moment, she finally found her voice again. "I'm not used to people talking to me like this," she admitted, voice low. Cole nodded gently, understanding without judgment. "Maybe it's time you hear it," he replied. Raina breathed slowly, letting the truth settle inside her bones. She wasn't defeated. She wasn't broken. She was simply learning, growing, changing in ways she hadn't realized she needed. And somehow, Cole's calm guidance felt like the first step toward becoming someone stronger. Not someone tamed, someone better. Cole gave her a small nod, then turned to walk back toward his horse. His steps carried the same steady confidence as before, but now Raina watched with new eyes. She recognized strength not in his grip or his stance, but in the quiet discipline that guided his actions. She wasn't ready to thank him. Not yet. But she was ready to think, ready to try, ready to see herself in a different light. She hadn't lost her fire. She had simply discovered a new direction to aim it, and that realization shifted something deep inside her. When Cole reached his horse, he glanced over his shoulder, giving her a nod that wasn't a command or an expectation, just acknowledgement. Respect earned, not forced. Raina felt her chest warm unexpectedly. She had never respected anyone this quickly, this intensely, this deeply. For the first time in her life, she didn't walk away from a confrontation feeling victorious or rebellious. She walked away feeling understood, and that was far rarer than any victory she could steal. That day, the wild Apache woman didn't lose her fire. She simply learned where it belonged,